Is this live? Okay, looks like it might in fact be. Whoop. Did we lose the stabilizer? Stand by, please, everybody. We'll be live in just a moment. There we go. Okay. Welcome. Late night stream. I had originally intended for this to begin at about 8:30 p.m. And this is a pretty important topic, something very weird going on as of yesterday. A lot of people might have seen this article in the Gateway Pundit talking about Peter Smith. And I found it strange because it initially looked like a year-old article. I sent it to Charles and he even said, this is an old article. But it wasn't. It was new. It was really strange. And then I also noticed that Jack Prosovic was tweeting about it. And Jack basically just, kind of put out the same thing. He was just directing people to this year-old Wall Street Journal article that had been written by Shane Harris. And I found it really weird because this Shane Harris article was basically quoting Peter Smith, who was dead at the time the article was written. This is from 2017, people might remember. We've been covering this on Crowdsource the Truth pretty much more than anybody, not because I'm so smart or anything like that, but Charles Ortel was one of the very last people to be in communication with Peter Smith, and that last communication with Peter Smith just coincidentally happened a couple days before I met Charles. People might remember
Peter
that.
Smith is, of course, let's just call him a Republican, well-known influencer. I think that'd be safe to say, who has been in and out of politics. And his claim to fame in the Wall Street Journal is that he was trying to get Hillary's emails on the dark web.
So first I'd like to say, my heart goes out to Peter's family.
Sorry that was so loud, everybody. It's a little tricky to mix all these different clips. And as a matter of fact, the reason this didn't start at 8:30 is that there's a lot of different clips that I wanted to pull because I've been thinking a lot about this strange death of Peter Smith. I didn't know the guy. I have no connection to him other than speaking to Charles about it. And it was weird too because on Wednesday, on Charles Ortel is closing in, we had Tom Lipscomb, who also personally knew Peter. And I want to go back and review that episode. Tom said a couple things about Peter Smith. Tom seemed pretty confident that he committed suicide. I find that weird. The guy was 81, and he was there in Rochester, Minnesota, very, very near the Mayo Clinic. And people might recall that Pepper Stanley and I went to the Aspen Suites Hotel just about 3 weeks ago, visited the very room where Peter Smith was found, and spoke to some of the employees of the hotel. Definitely a lot of people who go to that hotel, most of the people who go to that hotel, are there specifically for medical treatment. So it just didn't make a lot of sense to me that the guy would commit suicide. People have speculated he did that to collect the life insurance, but certainly if he was going to die, he could get the life insurance. And suffocation, I don't know, just so much weird stuff about it. His assistant, Jonathan Safran, has been very unreachable, and I don't know, I just found it so strange. See, the other thing is, these strange things don't ever seem to happen in an isolated kind of a way. A lot of people may have been seeing on Twitter, actually I know that a lot of people were because they were emailing me. My former associate, George Swigert, was demanding that I provide him with an image of a BlackBerry. He likes to make these public call-outs to people And certainly, rather than, contacting me by email or phone, I think he wants to create this weird situation where there's this sort of external pressure on me, or at least he alerts people that he's asking me for something. And he tries to do it in such a way that seems like, George is doing this. I hold the key to crack the case. How many times has he said this? George makes these public call-outs to me. I remember when I was in New Zealand, he made a video accusing me of somehow interfering with some mercy mission he was putting together to give some surgery to that girl, Voila, who Julian Assange had tweeted a photograph of in 2015. Voila, as far as I know from Twitter, had been hit with white phosphorus and it burned her skin horribly. And I was really surprised to see this video from George accusing me of doing something to interfere with whatever it was he was talking about. I didn't know anything.
Florida-based phosphorus, and they're mining it from the Western Sahara Desert. These white phosphorus are created weapons. If you don't believe me, the 8-year-old girl...
Sorry, I'm a little out of sequence there. I just inadvertently hit that clip. But we're going to talk about that in a minute, because it does come back to Jack. And Jack was right there in Warsaw talking to a guy named Kevin. But before we look at that, I just want to continue to tell everybody how I was very surprised that George made this video accusing me publicly of interfering with some medical treatment he was supposedly working to get for this young girl, Voila. Now, I never speak to George. George has lied to me. George has lied about me. George has betrayed me as a friend, as a business associate. He has cost me a lot of money from his irresponsible behavior. And when people who listen to George and me started to email me and ask me to help George, what I said was, I am not interested in even speaking to George until he pays me back the over $4,000 that it cost me to travel back and forth to Ohio, to pay for his plane tickets to Ohio, hotels in Ohio, car rentals in Ohio, all of that stuff, all to do with his grotesquely irresponsible behavior, falling asleep drunk in a car, getting arrested, going to court, all that stuff. George put out some tweet trying to negotiate with me for splitting Patreon or something. I am not interested in negotiating with George. Anything that George is saying relative to that, as far as I can tell, is untrue. He's saying he wasn't paid. I paid for everything when George and I were working together, and we had a pretty clear understanding. And the problem was George was never able to consistently do what he had committed to me that he would do. And so now he seems really dedicated to making up stupid stories to try to rope me into his nonsense, to give me assignments and interviews to do where he thinks he's helping me. But the message I want to put out to the good people of the public is that I do not trust George Webb Swigert. And I suspect that anything that he implores me to do or tries to get other people to implore me to do is very likely a trick. You see, I suspect if I had released this image,
that Congress still uses
George probably would have had his brother issue some kind of lawsuit or try to get me in trouble for revealing congressional information or who knows what. But this is a video that was taken maybe May or June of 2017. And a lot of people remember this video. George has reminded people about it just recently. I don't know, he wanted the image of that BlackBerry. Like I said, I'm not interested in helping George with anything, because anytime I've ever tried to do it, it's resulted in a problem for me. And I have good reason to believe that George has been and continues to work with all of the people that have done nothing but cause problems for me. So I don't trust the guy, and I don't think other people should trust him either, and I'm definitely not interested in helping him. Now, the other crazy thing is that very night that George got the BlackBerry from Deep BlackBerry, all these things seemed real coincidental at the time that they happened. Like, I had met Jack Prosovic at the Deplorables, the inauguration party. He organized a big party. I went there, met him, met his lovely wife. I think they were engaged at the time. She's very nice. Jack is nice. And ran into Jack again another time a few months later, and he invited me to a screening of Get Me Roger Stone. So George happened to be driving me to that screening. George, there wasn't space for him apparently, that's what Jack said. And so while we were on the drive to this Jack Prosovic event, a phone call came in to George from this deep BlackBerry guy who gave George this BlackBerry. And George and he proceeded to get pretty drunk, I think exceedingly drunk, as people can see in that video. And the guy left the BlackBerry at the bar. When I came back from Jack's screening, the guy was gone. George was sitting there drunk. And he said he had given this congressional BlackBerry to the bartender. Why would you do that? I have no idea. But I convinced the bartender to give it back to us. We got the BlackBerry, made that video outside the jail where Guccifer 2.0 was. But there's a couple of other things that happened that night that maybe people don't exactly know about. I had interviewed Jack, and I've never published that interview for a couple of reasons. Mostly, Jack showed up late. He kind of didn't really let me get a word in edgewise, and there just wasn't all that much said in the interview that I felt was really necessary to release it. So it never came out, but I might go back and review it and bring it out, because there's a couple of other strange things that have happened relative to my friend Jack. And people may recall that Jack was in Warsaw later that same year.
Florida-based phosphorus,
Kevin came up to
and they're
him
mining
out of
it
nowhere.
from the Western Sahara Desert. These white phosphorus are created weapons. If you don't believe me, the 8-year-old girl of Wahib, her
He
face
means
is
Wallah.
burned by white phosphorus in Yemen. These
Right.
weapons are
and
being used.
and we've seen the face. They won't
in
show the
Iraq.
face on the mainstream media, but we've shown.
Yeah, I've shown it
right.
many times.
We've shown it. Yes.
The fact of human organ.
We've shown it. I've
trafficking.
shown it. Who showed it, Jack?
Human organ.
I've also got indications that I haven't actually broken the story yet, but I've got indications that the Obama State Department was funding different organizations and hospitals that are involved
Mayo Clinic.
in organ trafficking.
Mayo Clinic.
Yeah.
The Mayo
Because
Clinic.
at the moment in
That's
Florida,
where
there's
Peter
a
Smith
DNC
was,
broadcast,
wasn't
not
it?
talked about on the news. And people are dying. People are being mysteriously suiciding. People are turning up on beaches, washed
Peter
up.
Smith
Yeah, suicide.
was
It was shot 3
mysteriously
times in the back.
suicided.
Yeah, suicide. Right.
This connects with visas and passports, etc., to do with human organ trafficking. This is all about the human organ trade. It is huge. It is massive, and it's got to stop. The white phosphorus has got to stop. The human trafficking has got to stop, and it's all been organised. These boats that they're pulling off of Libya, okay, off Libya, 11 miles
Now,
off. They make a
who's
phone
this
call,
guy
the
who
boats
just showed
come
up
from
with the
there.
Illuminati
Things that
T-shirt?
The people
Got
smugglers have direct phone.
pyramids all
And how
over
did
it.
they get past?
Because
Keep
they've
your
got
eye on
direct
that guy
phone
in the
rates to
middle.
the ships that are coming to pick them up. Soros-funded ships are coming to pick them up and ship them in 11 miles off the shore of Libya. They have direct. It's organised. The whole lot of this is organised. People need to wake up as what's going on. Your governments, our governments, have been working illegally with weapons, black weapons supplies. Bulgaria, Diliana, the Becks in Florida, the 2 lawyers. I don't know if you
I read
saw-
about the Becks yesterday, but I saw the headline. But
you
I
need to
didn't.
watch the Owen Scheuer,
Owen did a piece on it.
an interview with her.
Okay.
She breaks down, but she gives you the links between that and the Clinton Foundation.
Okay.
Again, Clinton Foundation. The Clinton Foundation is the whole root of all of this, and Clinton Global Initiative. The Podestas, Tony Podesta, John Podesta. You need to look at people like George Webb of and Crowdsource.
I know George. Yeah, I know George. I know George and Jason. Yeah.
They are bringing out all of this, but there are other people behind the scenes.
I was
helping
with
as much
them.
as
I was with
possible.
them last week. We went to the Seth Ridge vigil.
Right. So if
Well, I don't disagree with what Kevin was saying there, but I did find it odd that in the middle of Warsaw, an English-speaking guy just popped out of nowhere and started talking to Jack about me and George. Now, I don't have a problem with Jack. I don't really have a problem with Kevin, although Kevin has become a little bit aggressive. He had contacted me a while ago and insisted that David Hawkins and Field McConnell were lying to me. Incidentally, if people missed the show only on Patreon earlier today at 2 p.m. on Fridays, I've begun doing a regular show with David Hawkins of Able Danger. And people can check that out only on Patreon. You can go to patreon.com/reverse CSI storyboards. That's David's page. You can support David, or you can go to patreon.com/crowdsource the truth and enjoy the reverse engineered crime scene investigations with David Hawkins. Of course, tomorrow at 6:30 p.m. Eastern, I'll be doing a show with Quinn Michaels only on Patreon, and Quinn has been discovering amazing things about his new friend, Mr. Leakey, and he's got some revelations for us tomorrow, so I hope people will tune into that. But I did find it really weird that Kevin was insistent that Able Danger was lying to me. And I said, look, maybe it's possible they've got something wrong, but I don't just, run to the conclusion that they're deliberately lying to me. And so Kevin and I got into a little bit of a disagreement, and I guess he decided he doesn't like me, because I happened to notice on his Twitter feed tonight he had a lot of bad things to say about me, and he called Kevin Shipp the other day to tell Kevin Shipp a bunch of bad things about me. So I don't know what motivates these people to tell them all these terrible things and to try to go to my best contacts, my most credible people, my closest associates, but a lot of people try to tell people like Charles Ortel and Kevin Shipp and various others that they shouldn't talk to me anymore, and I don't really like that. But let's get back to Peter Smith, because this is really weird. Jack put out that tweet. He's saying that he's got information that Peter Smith is going to come up in the Robert Mueller investigation, and that is interesting. Because if people remember, when Pepper Stanley and I went to Minnesota not that long ago, nobody knows more about this Peter Smith case than Pepper. She has been studying it like crazy, like nobody's business. Pepper was the one, if you recall, who retrieved the Walmart security camera footage, and that was really amazing because that allowed us to actually see Peter Smith in the Walmart, or the person that we believe to be Peter Smith, purchasing the helium. And for people who are unfamiliar, just search YouTube for Peter Smith. You'll see a lot of Crowdsource the Truth videos about him. Peter was allegedly suffocated by putting a bag over his head and filling it with helium. There's a lot of strange things about the crime scene. I asked David Hawkins if we could do a reverse engineer crime scene investigation, but obviously David is very busy and he's pretty focused on 9/11, so I'm not sure if we're going to get to do that for a little while. But what Pepper and I found out was that there seemed to be a real concerted effort to paint Peter Smith, who of course is dead, as kind of the kingpin of this whole Russia situation, interfering, whatever it is that they're alleging. And one of the guys who was real early out front with that was Shane Harris of the Wall Street Journal. Shane has written 2 articles quoting Peter in what was, supposed to be an off-the-record conversation. He's quoted in the Wall Street Journal article, and the Wall Street Journal article came out after Peter was dead. So Peter couldn't really speak for himself, couldn't contest any of the things that were there. And I don't know if I have a lot of confidence in that article. The other strange characters that keep showing up in this scenario, Ben Wittes. Ben Wittes is a journalist who's affiliated with the Brookings Institute, and of course he's also purportedly the best friend of James Comey. And he was the one that James Comey leaked all kinds of classified information to, all about this Russia investigation and President Trump. And I'm not sure what Ben Wittes is up to, but he created a pretty sophisticated, what I would call, transmedia marketing campaign, where he had a little mini cannon firing at soda cans and shaving cream cans, and he made this whole tick, 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 boom thing that was coordinated with Rachel Maddow, who I do not think is an honest journalist, who I do not think is presenting us with honest information. She's kind of a Trump derangement syndrome poster child who puts out a lot of fake news and a lot of crap, if you want to ask me. But the other fellow that's involved with this who's really odd and interesting is this guy, Matt Tate. Now, Matt Tate, his resume is quite storied. Matt Tate worked for GCHQ, of course, the British equivalent of the NSA. He is a cybersecurity specialist and a hacker. He worked for Google Project Zero, which is a pretty mysterious thing. That's supposedly a Google project that is benevolent and going to help the internet find out where its weak spots are so that manufacturers can strengthen their products. But I suspect that they are just a bunch of hackers who work for Google and can kind of do whatever they want. So Matt Tate is involved with this lawfare blog, and when Shane Harris was on the Rachel Maddow show talking about all of this stuff, he was also on the lawfare blog at the same time, and it feels like this coordinated effort. And again, I found it strange that Jack would tweet about this year-old Wall Street Journal article at the same moment that the Gateway Pundit put out their article, and it wasn't new reporting. That doesn't really seem like the Jack that I know. I mean, yeah, he was saying Robert Mueller is going to talk about him or something like that, but it was just so weird that these guys seem to be putting out a year-old story. So I don't have any answers. I mean, the title of this video is a legitimate question. Why is Peter Smith, or rather is Peter Smith, the most important guy you never heard of? But he certainly seems important. They're trying to make it seem as if Peter Smith was working with Russian hackers who were affiliated with Putin or the Russian government or something like that. And the thing that they didn't realize, that Shane Harris probably didn't know, was that Peter Smith had sent emails to associates that we're in touch with, and we have the emails. We showed them in the video with Pepper Stanley, that cold case murder investigation about Peter Smith from 3 weeks ago. And in those emails, Peter specifically says that they are not state-affiliated actors, not affiliated with the Russian government. And Charles has told us multiple times that he did not think that Peter was depressed. He was quite surprised when he heard that the verdict was suicide. And when Pepper and I spoke to the local police there in Rochester, Minnesota, they said the case was closed and that we had information that they didn't even have. So I don't necessarily have any conclusions right now, but I got a lot of questions. And I'm real curious that George always seems to be trying to get me involved in some kind of piece of nonsense that has nothing to do with anything, and is some concocted crap that he's either trying to waste my time with, or get me into trouble with, or create some pretext for Robert David Steele or his brother to bring some kind of fraudulent lawsuit against me. And I don't trust George, and I don't like George. And so if George, through a video, tells you to contact me to get me to do something, ignore him, please. And I am not going to even listen to George until he pays me back the over $4,000 that he owes me. There is no negotiating to be done with George. There is no further money that I'm going to pay to George. George should pay me that money back. Because I also want to know where George got $2,000 to give to Robin Gritz when the night before his trial in Zanesville, he called me crying like a baby, asking if I could re-up at the hotel for another night with a credit card. Suddenly George has all this money to give out, but he can't give me back the $4,000. George, who came to that jail to bail you out? Not your son, not your brothers, it was me. And yes, the cops gave me back the $3,500 for the bail, but I had to pay for the travel, the hotel, the rental cars, all that. And George is trying to tell you, oh, I didn't take a salary while I was working with Jason. Well, I didn't take a salary either. And you know, the original plan for Crowdsource the Truth, when I first started it, I didn't make a business plan. I just figured, yeah, I'll do this, and then I'll finance it with 3D production work. But guess what? There's been no 3D production work, and I think anybody watching knows I'm doing this all day. I mean, geez, it took me 3 hours to put together those video clips and get them encoded into a format where we could play them right here. And I didn't do it because I want money. I did it because something weird is going on, and I think someone murdered Peter Smith. And I think Peter Smith may have had these emails from Hillary Clinton. And why is it that anybody who gets close to these emails seems to randomly, inexplicably, unexpectedly kill themselves? And why are there 2 helium tanks in the guy's room if he's only seen purchasing 1? And Walmart only had 1 in stock that day. The guy had no rental car. The person who drives the shuttle bus for Walmart did not remember seeing an 81-year-old man get on the bus with a tank of helium. That doesn't mean he didn't do it, but that seems like something you might remember to me. So we got a lot of unanswered questions. And you know what? I don't care about Blackberries, you know? If George were organized, he could still be in touch with the guy who gave him the Blackberry. I got a picture of that guy I could publish if you want. But I'm not going to be drawn into George's fake nonsense. George, what's going on with Walla? Did you get her the surgery yet? Because I had nothing to do with anything. I didn't even know you were doing anything. As a matter of fact, I think you made that whole story up just so you could release my phone number and make up a fake story about an Ethiopian model who I never met. Because George lies to you people, and George takes little bits and pieces of information and connects them in ways that they don't connect. And I think people should be very careful about who they listen to and who they believe, because what I've come to understand is that there's a lot of people on the internet and in the world who are specifically trying to lie to us. I don't necessarily know why, but I know they are. Anyway, that's all I got about Peter Smith right now. Thanks everybody for watching, and make sure you tune in tomorrow for Quinn Michaels and me talking about Mr. Leakey. Quinn's discovered a cipher that could help us understand some of the encoded messages that are being transmitted, possibly over YouTube. Potato waffle irons, does that ring a bell for anybody? Anyway, good night everybody. Thanks for watching.